What do you think an angry human warship does when the people it loves disappear behind enemy walls? Because the worst mistake in the galaxy was never attacking humanity. It was making a human crew wait. And if stories like this make your pulse jump, hit like, subscribe, and share this video with the one friend who always asks for one more space story. The first warning was not a shot, it was silence. Not the easy kind, not the quiet of empty space, where distance swallowed noise and light came late. This was a chosen silence, the kind that made old commanders stop talking in the middle of a sentence, the kind that made sensor officers sit up straighter and check their boards twice, the kind that made the ancient races remember stories they did not enjoy retelling. At the far edge of the Ilian Drift, where the star maps turned uncertain and trade routes bent away from disputed territory, Monitoring Array 9 lost a section of sky for exactly 6 seconds. Its instruments did not fail. Its power never dropped. Its logs showed no damage. But a whole slice of black simply went missing, as if something had passed through the stars and convinced the universe not to mention it. The array's overseer was a Lauren veteran named Sethek, old enough to remember 3 border wars and wise enough to fear what looked impossible. He replayed the anomaly 7 times. On the 8th, he leaned closer and noticed something strange. The missing stars did not flicker like a glitch. They moved, just slightly, as if a shape larger than a city had crossed in front of them without reflecting light, broadcasting heat, or giving back even the smallest whisper of an engine wake. Sethek did not alert his superiors right away. That was not hesitation, that was dread. He opened an archive sealed by treaty after the Veyer collapse, entered an authorization code he had sworn never to use again, and read a file last updated 23 years earlier. Its title was short: Human Naval Masking Behavior Under Emotional Stress Conditions. By the time he finished the first page, the scales on his neck had gone pale. 3 sectors away, inside the prison station Athara Spindle, 13 human detainees sat in separate containment rooms and tried not to count time out loud. The station officially did not exist. On public charts, that patch of orbit belonged to the Serac Dominion's Customs Authority, a bureaucratic holding platform used for cargo inspections and traffic review. In practice, it was a black site built inside the hollowed spine of an old refinery, armored with ugly slabs of metal, and wrapped in legal language so dense it had suffocated every outside inspection for 19 years. Its cells were clean in the cruel way expensive cages often were. The lights never fully dimmed. The air was a little too cold. The cameras were placed where the prisoners could see them. Meals arrived on time, medical scans were regular, and every courtesy was designed to hide the deeper insult. No charges. No legal contact. No notice sent home. No names entered into the Dominion registry. The prisoners were not soldiers. That was the part Captain Alara Quinn could not stop thinking about. She was a survey commander, not a war captain. Her people belonged to the civilian exploration vessel Meridian Vale, a long-range mapping ship under Earth Charter protection. Their job was simple on paper: chart dust lanes, verify gravity wells, scan mineral signatures, update navigation corridors no one else wanted to spend 6 months checking. The kind of work that built trade and prevented accidents and bored anyone who had never done it. They had crossed near a disputed boundary because the boundary had shifted on 3 separate Dominion maps, each stamped valid by a different ministry. Alara had transmitted route logs before entry, during entry, and after exit. She had complied with every published requirement. 12 hours later, Dominion interceptors had locked their drives, boarded them under emergency authority, and taken 13 members of the forward survey team away for temporary jurisdictional review. That had been 8 days ago. Now she sat on the edge of a narrow steel bunk, staring at the faint reflection of her own face in the cell glass. She looked older already, not broken, not beaten, just pulled tight. There were bruises on her wrist where restraints had rubbed during transfer. Across the corridor, if the timing of footsteps meant anything, medical botanist Lion Morna was still coughing from the sedatives they had used on day one. 2 cells down from him was Terk Vale, systems geologist, 26 years old, married for 9 months, who had laughed through every bad meal on the Meridian and had gone quiet on the second day of detention. Ilara hated quiet on good people. At first the Dominion officers had been almost polite. There were forms, questions, repeat questions. Then came the harder edge. Why had Earth sent a survey ship near a restricted zone? Why had the Meridian Veil altered its scan pattern twice within the same orbital window? Why had their drone telemetry included military-grade depth overlays? Ilara had answered the same way every time. Because the zone was not marked. Because scan patterns changed with rock density. Because human survey tools were built to survive, and surviving looked suspicious to governments that treated fragility as honesty. On day 4, the questioning stopped. That frightened her more. Interrogation meant pressure. Pressure meant purpose. Silence meant decision. Somewhere above her, past metal and sealed bulkheads, someone had chosen a path and no longer cared whether the detainees understood it. She was still thinking about that when the wall speaker cracked to life with a burst of static. No voice followed. Just static, 3 pulses long, then dead air. Ilara froze. Every ship in the Earth survey fleet knew that pattern. It was not an official signal. It was older than regulations, older than the charter. A habit passed between crews the way sailors on forgotten oceans had once tapped codes on pipes and hull plates. Still here, still together, hold. Her throat tightened so fast it hurt. She stood, crossed to the glass, and pressed her hand against it as if the others could somehow feel it through layers of prison metal. Down the corridor, she heard movement, a laugh that broke into a sob, a fist thumping once against a wall, someone whispering, "They found us." No, Ilara thought. Not they. The station superintendent, Arvin Saul, entered command deck 20 minutes later with the smooth confidence of a man who had spent most of his life being obeyed without ever earning it. He wore a civilian authority mantle instead of armor, though he liked to stand with his hands behind his back the way officers did. Tall, silver-haired, careful with his expression, he had the polished calm of politicians who believed composure could replace judgment. Commander Rel Vec, military director of Athara Spindle, did not stand when Saul entered. He only turned his head slightly from the central tactical display. "You took your time," Vec said. "I came as soon as I was told there might be an overreaction," Saul replied. Rel Vec had been in uniform for 31 years. He had lost an eye over Dren Hollow, his left hand in the siege of Paul Rex, and whatever remained of his patience during 6 years in border command. He respected clarity, chain of command, and the brutal honesty of weapons ranges. He had no use for bureaucrats posted to hidden prisons. Normally he tolerated Arvin Saul because he had to. Tonight he did not try very hard. Monitoring Array 9 reported a masked object entering the drift, Vec said. 2 long-range relays went blind for 4.2 seconds. Customs beacon traffic has gone silent in a 5 million kilometer shell around us. Our outer pickets stopped answering 3 minutes ago. Saul glanced at the display and frowned. Pirates. Every officer on the deck looked at him. Relvec said nothing for a moment, then very quietly, "No." A young censor lieutenant swallowed. "Sir, we have confirmation now. The object has decloaked." The display changed. For a heartbeat, no one on the deck moved. There are ships built to impress. Tall prows, gleaming fins, ceremonial lines meant to reassure allies and intimidate rivals. This was not one of them. The vessel hanging beyond the station's outer defense envelope looked like violence designed by engineers who had no interest in being misunderstood. It was broad through the spine, armored in overlapping slabs, with engine housings sunk deep into the hull and weapon ports distributed in grim, practical geometry. Nothing curved unless physics demanded it. Nothing shone unless it was hot enough to do so. Its profile was ugly in the way cliffs were ugly. Its name resolved a moment later on a low-band human identification burst. UES Resolute Wrath. Not a battleship, not a carrier, not even one of the massive line breakers the Serac briefings love to exaggerate. A retrieval cruiser. Arvin Saul read the classification aloud and let out a thin breath that was almost laughter. That is our concern, one cruiser. Relvec turned his full body then, looking at the civilian overseer with open disbelief. You think that makes this better? Saul shrugged. If Earth intended war, they would not send a single vessel. No, said Vec. If Earth intended spectacle, they would send a fleet. If they sent one ship, they intend precision. The lieutenant at sensors raised a trembling hand. Commander, the human vessel is inside our warning perimeter. That is not possible, Saul snapped. It is current fact, sir. How? The lieutenant stared at his own readout as if it might apologize. I do not know. Relvec knew enough. Because he had read the human files everyone else skimmed. Because he had watched footage from border actions the Dominion classified above strategic black. Because once, many years ago, he had stood on an Allied station and seen what remained of a pirate destroyer after a human corvette had cut through it to reach evacuated civilians trapped behind it. Human warships did not behave as Dominion doctrine expected warships to behave. They did not value distance the same way. They did not stage force the same way. Worst of all, they did not separate emotion from planning. Dominion fleets considered anger a weakness because anger clouded judgment. Humans had found a different use for it. They burned it clean. They turned it into focus. The resolute wrath advanced without hurry. That was the detail that chilled the deck most. No panicked acceleration. No wild attack angle. No frantic transmission barrage. It came on in a straight line, dark gray against starfire, holding a speed that said it had already calculated the station's response and was disappointed by how little work that required. When it reached 1,000 kilometers, every defense battery on Athara's spindle armed itself. When it reached 800, the batteries stopped taking commands from local targeting. When it reached 600, the station's internal clocks all shifted by 0.3 of a second. When it reached 500, a human voice arrived over an open channel, calm enough to feel dangerous. Athara Spindle, the voice said. This is Captain Mara Ilian of the United Earth ship Resolute Wrath. I am speaking on a recorded line under the Emergency Recovery Covenant, Article 4, Subsection 9. You are holding 13 protected Earth civilians in unlawful detention. You will release them immediately. No one on the command deck answered at once. The voice continued, never rising. You have 8 minutes to transmit cell access, medical status, and escort clearance to Dock 3. My people will walk out alive. You will not touch them again. If you comply, this remains a jurisdictional crime and a diplomatic disaster. If you refuse, it becomes a recovery operation, and you will discover the difference in ways your insurers cannot help with. Arvin Saul stepped toward the console before Relvec could stop him. This station operates under Dominion Security Authority, he said. The detainees are under legal review. Your presence here is an act of armed coercion. Captain Mara Ilian answered so fast it felt like she had expected the line. No, she said. Your kidnapping of survey personnel was armed coercion. I am the consequence. The channel closed. No one breathed for a full second. Then Arvin Saul laughed again, but this time it had cracks in it. A performance, he said, a very human performance. Relvec looked back to the tactical display. The countdown transmitted from the Resolute Wrath had appeared in the corner of every screen on the deck. 0743, 0742, 0741. If you are wise, Vex said, you will order the release. Saul's expression hardened. We are not surrendering detainees because a captain recites legal articles with dramatic timing. Relvek stepped closer until they stood almost chest to chest. That captain did not send her strongest ship. Saul's eyes narrowed. You assume too much. No, said Vec, I remember too much. If you can already feel where this is going, leave a like, join the channel, and pass this story to someone who loves smart sci-fi more than sleep. 3 decks below, in a compartment that had once housed ore separation pumps, Lieutenant Nessa Ward sealed the collar of her boarding armor and listened to the ship breathe. The interior of the Resolute Wrath was not sleek. It was too old for sleek and too busy for elegance. Pipes ran behind armored grating. Emergency kits sat every 10 meters. Handholds lined the corridor even in sections where gravity almost never failed. The ship had been rebuilt so many times that different generations of human engineering sat side by side like stubborn relatives. New sensor mesh wrapped over old hull struts. Fresh tactical uplinks shared wall space with manual override, levers the color of dried blood. Nessa loved every scar. Across from her, Sergeant Jun Park checked the magnetic lock on his rifle, then checked it again even though it had passed inspection 20 minutes ago. You're grinding your teeth, Nessa said. I know. You'll crack one. Then medical can grow me another. The rest of boarding team 2 stood in practice stillness around them. 12 Marines in hardshell assault gear, each carrying breaching foam, shock webs, compact ballistic sidearms, medical patches, and just enough explosives to change architecture without bragging about it. They were not excited. That would have been easier to manage. Excitement was simple chemistry. What moved through the compartment now was colder. 13 missing civilians. 8 days without contact. 1 botanist. 1 medic. 3 cartographers. 2 married engineers who had spent their honeymoon on assignment because they wanted extra credit toward a down payment back in L. Ago's arcology. The ship knew all their names. That was the problem. Human ships were not neutral about their crews. Not truly. The charter called all personnel interchangeable for purposes of casualty modeling and operational continuity. Humans wrote regulations like everyone else because civilizations liked paperwork and the illusion of clean systems. But in practice, a ship became a place, and a place became a community, and a community remembered who took coffee with too much sugar, who sang badly during maintenance shifts, who left tools in strange compartments and always came back for them, who had a child on Mars, who was going to propose next rotation, who cried in the engine bay the day a message from home finally arrived. The 13 detainees were not abstract assets to the Resolute Wrath. They were people attached by threads to other people. Every thread now ran through the ship like live wire. Nessa checked the status board on her wrist. Dock insertion window, 6 minutes. Station interior interference, heavy. Expected resistance, moderate to severe. Civilian condition, unknown. Captain standing directive, recover all 13. Avoid lethal force where possible. Protect detainees above all. Jun Park gave a humorless smile. You know what the Dominion thinks an angry human crew looks like. Nessa glanced up, loud. Wild, sloppy, emotional. He snapped a fresh battery into his shield rig. Still makes me laugh. Because that was the lie almost every rival power told itself. They saw human grief at funerals, human volume in bars, human tears in hospitals, human rage in their entertainment, and assumed the species carried emotion like open flame. Easy to see, easy to predict. They never watched what happened after the first minute. Humans trained for the second minute. The third. The 10th. Past the shout, past the pain, past the moment when fury could waste itself in noise. What remained after that was far more dangerous, not chaos, decision. At the far end of the compartment, the hatch opened, and Captain Mara Ilian stepped in. No speech followed. She did not believe in speeches before work. She was of middling height, dark-skinned, hair cut short against the skull, uniform collar open, because she hated feeling fabric at her throat during combat operations. There was a thin scar under her right eye and a permanent look in her face like she had already measured the room and everyone in it. Her officers trusted her because she was not theatrical. Her enemies feared her because she was not theatrical. Mara walked to the center of the compartment and looked at each Marine in turn. "Cell map just updated," she said. "Station commander wants to comply. Civilian superintendent blocked him. That tells us two things. First, some people over there still understand reality. Second, reality is not in charge." A few grim smiles. "We have 13 alive as of 6 hours ago. No confirmed deaths. No confirmed transfers. Team 1 secures the route to the detention block. Team 2 handles extraction. Team 3 locks down power relays between prison control and docking control. Team 4 holds breach and gets our people home if everything else catches fire." She let that sit a moment. "Listen carefully. We are not going in to punish anyone. We are going in because 13 of ours were taken and the clock for civilized options has expired. You will act like professionals. Fast, clean, controlled. But if anyone between you and those civilians decides to turn procedure into blood, end the decision." No shouting followed, no battle cry. The Marines only nodded. Mara looked at Nessa last. "Lieutenant." "Yes, Captain." "One of the detainees is your brother." The compartment got even quieter. Nessa kept her face still. "Yes, ma'am." "Do you need me to reassign extraction lead?" "No, ma'am." Mara held her gaze another second, then she nodded once. "Bring him back." She left as abruptly as she had come. Jun exhaled through his nose. That helped. Nessa flexed her hand inside her glove until the fingers stopped wanting to shake. Her brother, Elia's ward, was not military. He was an astrocartographer who collected antique maps and sent their mother voice notes from every system he visited. He had joined the Meridian Veil because he loved regions of space no one else considered worth looking at. He believed every blank place on a chart was an invitation. 8 days ago, he had left her a message she still had not answered because she had been on operations when it came in. "Hey Ness, found a dust lane that folds like spilled silk under UV. You'd love it. Remind me to show you when I'm back. Also, I won the argument. You still owe me dinner." She had played that message 9 times. She would get many more chances. On command deck 2, Arvin Saul made the choice that would follow his name long after his body was dust. "Signal Dominion Response Group Halcyon," he said. "Immediate reinforcement. Mark the human vessel hostile. Oh. Order outer defense drones to active intercept." Relvek stared at him. "You are requesting fleet action over survey detainees." "I am refusing to let Earth dictate border law at gunpoint." "They already dictated it," Vex said. "They are outside the hull." Saul turned sharply. "You are relieved if you cannot enforce Dominion authority." Relvek did not move. "I am the military director of this station. And I hold emergency civilian override. That authority exists for evacuation and containment." "It exists," Saul said, "because military men lose nerve when they think losses might be personal." For a second the command deck seemed to forget how to breathe. 2 officers looked down. One quietly took a step back. Relvek's ruined left hand tightened at his side. "You think this is about nerve," he said. "I think this is about bluff." At tactical the countdown reached 0400. Across Athara Spindle, blast doors began cycling into combat positions. Security teams were rerouted from customs holds to prison access corridors. Dock 3 locked down. Dock 1 armed its turret ring. 3 internal lifts froze between levels with civilian staff still inside them. None of it happened cleanly. Half the station personnel had never trained for a real assault because the station had not been built to fight one. It had been built to frighten captives and hide paperwork. Those were different things. Below, in the detention wing, Senior Custodian Pell received new orders over a private security band and felt his stomach drop through the floor. Hold detainees in place. Delay transfer. If forced entry occurs, relocate Category Red prisoners through tunnel access to secure lower bay. Category Red meant humans. Pell looked through the observation slit at Cell 7, where Elia's ward sat on the floor with his back against the bunk, staring at nothing. The young man's lip was split. One eye was dark with bruising. He had asked politely for his sister during the first day, then for legal counsel, then for any acknowledgement that his ship knew where he was. By day 6, he had stopped asking. Pell had worked black sites his whole adult life. He knew how to package ugly work in clean language. He told himself stability required hard places. He told himself dangerous zones needed quiet machinery behind the law. He told himself all the usual things. He was tired of listening to himself. He keyed open the internal line to his deputy. How many security teams between us and Dock 3? 3, maybe 4. Why? Pell watched Elias lift his head, as if hearing something through the wall. Because, Pell said, if the humans come through that door, I would prefer not to die defending paperwork. On the Resolute Wrath, the countdown reached 03:12. Captain Mara stood on the combat bridge with both hands resting on the edge of the tactical rail. Around her, the crew moved in low voices and sharp motions. Helm riding microthrust corrections. Sensor warfare feeding false clutter into station relays. Point defense tracking every warm barrel in a 1,000-kilometer shell. Medical teams staged at recovery bay. Damage control units prepositioned along the port spine. Nobody raised their voice because nobody needed to. Executive Officer Sami Orlov looked over from weapons. Dock 3 still locked. Station commander transmitting distress on a military narrowband. Civilian superintendent overriding every release order he sends. Mara nodded. So Vec wants to survive. Seems that way. Good, he'll be useful after. Sami hesitated. Halcyon Response Group launched. Estimated contact 13 minutes. The bridge stayed quiet. That was later than Mara had feared and sooner than she liked. Dominion response fleets were not brilliant, but they were heavy and obedient. If Halcyon arrived while her boarding teams were still inside the station, the geometry would get ugly. How many ships? 6 confirmed. 2 destroyers, 3 escorts, 1 missile carrier. Any cruiser support? None yet. Mara tapped the tactical display once. Then Saul panicked before he escalated fully. Good. Sami gave her a sideways look. You sound disappointed. I sound busy. She zoomed the station schematic. Prison wing. Maintenance conduit. Secondary pressure tunnel. Dock 3 sealed. Dock 2 mined. Dock 1 turreted. Old refinery vents behind the station's lower spine, half documented and badly shielded. There, she said. Sami leaned in. Refinery runnels, those are narrow. Exactly. They'll scrape armor off the boarding pods. Then the armor can be brave. At comms, Ensign Prout turned. Captain, receiving open-band civilian chatter from the station, mostly internal panic, some security bands unsecured. Any useful voices? One prison custodian requesting clarification on relocation orders. Sounds afraid. Mara considered that. Then, patch a burst to the detention wing only, audio and text. Prout's hands moved. Ready. Mara spoke without leaning toward the M. Ike. To detention personnel on Athara Spindle. This is Captain Mara Ilian. You have been placed between illegal orders and an incoming recovery team. Listen carefully. If you unlock the cells and move away from the prisoners, your images will be tagged non-hostile by our boarding systems. If you harm any detainee or participate in relocation, I will know your face before this night ends. She nodded once. Send it. Prout did. No one said anything for a moment. Then Sami gave a low whistle, gentle. Honest, Mara said. The countdown hit 0200. Across the detention block, speakers crackled. Pell heard the human captain's message, closed his eyes, and felt something he had not felt in years. Relief. He walked to the central lock console, entered his authorization chain, and started opening cells. Alarm screamed instantly. His deputy whirled. What are you doing? Choosing the side that might leave me breathing. The deputy's mouth opened. Pell pointed at the corridor camera. Look closely. That is the face of a human captain who already made peace with consequences. If her people are angry, we are standing in the path of math, not emotion. Unlock the others. The deputy, to his everlasting credit, did. Cells began to cycle open. Alara Quinn heard the first seal break and stepped back from the door in shock. Across the corridor, Elias Ward stumbled out of his own cell, blinking under brighter lights. Lion Morno leaned on the frame with shaking legs. Terk Vale came half running, half falling into the passage. Someone laughed. Someone cursed. Someone asked if this was a trick. Pell lifted both hands where they could see them. If it is not mine. Move now. Alara, Elias said, voice rough, is that us? She grabbed his face with both hands, checked his eyes, then pulled him into a fierce, brief hug. Yes, move. The corridor lights turned red. Somewhere far above, the entire station lurched. If this standoff has you leaning closer to the screen, subscribe, tap like, and send this to a friend who would absolutely board the shuttle anyway. The first human boarding pods did not come through the docks. That was one of the many things the Dominion would spend years explaining to itself afterward. Athara Spindle had layered its official approach vectors with enough guns and lockout software to discourage ordinary raiders. Its prison wing sat behind sealed transit paths and armored access gates designed by committees that believed linear control equaled security. But the station had once been an industrial refinery. Deep inside its structure ran ancient waste channels, slag vents, thermal drains, and service shafts that no one bothered upgrading because nobody expected military use from dirty old machinery. Humans expected use from everything. 3 boarding pods struck the station's lower spine almost at once, not with explosive drama but with brutal accuracy. Magnetic jaws locked, hull cutters spun, ceramic dust sprayed into vacuum. Then the pods shoved themselves into channels only maintenance drones were supposed to fit through, grinding metal, tearing sensor webs, and sending showers of sparks through forgotten spaces no one had mapped in years. Inside Pod 2, Nessa Ward rode impact with her shoulders braced and her jaw clenched so hard her ears rang. Status, she snapped. Jun Park checked the forward feed, narrower than promised. Still moving. Like an insult. The pod slammed left, sheared through a half-collapsed brace, and punched into a vertical conduit with enough force to throw 3 Marines against their restraints. A green light blinked. Breach point reached. Nessa hit the release. The pod's front iris split apart and cold station air rolled in carrying oil, hot wiring, and something sour beneath it all. Human boots hit grating in a tight stream. Team 2 spread out, weapons up, HUD markers painting root arrows over their visors. Comms check. Green. Vitals. Green. Then move. They moved. Human boarding doctrine looked clumsy to outside observers because it rejected elegance. Dominion teams favored symmetrical room entries, precise formation geometry, polished threat announcements. Human Marines liked ugly angles if ugly angles worked. One pair covered high, one covered knees and blind corners, one operated breaching gel, one handled the wounded, one watched doors no one else trusted. They did not flow like dancers. They hit like workers trying to finish before the storm got worse. At the first junction, two Dominion security officers spun toward them, weapons half raised in confusion. Nessa's shield flashed up. Jun's shock round struck one officer's center chest, dumping enough charge through the armor to lock every muscle at once. The second officer fired wildly. 3 Marines answered with foam packs that hardened over his arms and helmet like concrete in fast motion. "Leave them breathing," Nessa said. "Always," Jun muttered. Ahead, Team 1 reported contact at the prison R. Alley doors. Team 3 had reached the power trunks. Team 4 held breach. Good enough. They descended a maintenance ladder 3 decks in 40 seconds. Around them, alarms fought with station announcements. Civilian staff were being told to shelter. Security units were being told to redeploy. And somewhere in the chaos, Arvin Saul was probably still convincing himself he had not already lost. On the command deck, Rel Vec watched internal camera feeds with the numb disbelief of a man seeing theory get strangled by reality. The human teams were inside. Already inside. No dock assault, no external bombardment, no broadside entry. They had come through waste channels and old industrial service lines the station's own emergency maps barely acknowledged. They moved too fast to intercept cleanly, and worse, they were selective. They ignored fleeing staff. They bypassed engineering dead ends. They disabled turret nests instead of destroying them if a clean path existed around. It was not a berserk assault. It was a rescue machine. Arvin Saul saw the same feeds and went white around the mouth. "Seal the prison deck," he shouted. "Flood Corridor 12 with suppressant gas. Cut gravity between sectors." Relvec turned on him. "You are about to gas your own people. I am containing borders. You are helping them justify what comes next." Saul jabbed a finger at the display. "What comes next is our fleet arriving and ending this theater." Relvec's laugh was almost sad. "You still think time is on your side." At that moment, the main display blinked red. Outer battery ring 1, offline. Ring 2, targeting ghost echoes. Drone swarm beta, non-responsive. Missile lock lattice, looped. How? Saul whispered. The answer sat less than 400 kilometers outside the hull. The Resolute Wrath had not opened full fire because it did not need to. Instead, it carved the station's defenses apart with humiliating patience. Jamming clusters bloomed like invisible smoke around guidance relays. Point defense bursts clipped missiles before they finished opening launch petals. Kinetic counterspikes shredded drone formations in blossoms of white metal. Every time a station gun found a firing solution, the human cruiser fed it false range data a fraction of a second before discharge, just enough to turn certainty into empty space. The Dominion gunners were being beaten by fractions. That was worse for morale than simple destruction. On the human bridge, weapons officer Sami Orlov did not smile. He only kept working, fingers moving across 3 interfaces at once. "Station ring degraded by 62%, he reported. "They're cycling to manual targeting." "Let them," Mara said. Halcyon response group updated, 9 minutes. Boarding teams. Team 2, 1 minute from detention block. Then we hold steady. She looked at the station again, not as an enemy fortress, as a problem with people hidden inside it. Human warships were dangerous because they remembered the mission while everyone else drowned in the fight. Anger did not erase the objective. It sharpened it until every choice arranged itself around one sentence. "Bring them home." In the detention wing, Alara Quinn had just gotten all 13 prisoners moving when gunfire erupted at the far end of the corridor. Not heavy fire, short bursts, controlled. Pell flinched against the wall. His deputy dropped flat and covered his head. Elias stepped in front of Lion without even seeming to think about it. Then the next sound came. Human voices. Left clear. Door. Hands, show me hands. The first Marine through the smoke wore dark boarding armor scarred down one shoulder, visor lit with blue tactical marks. The second carried a folding shield. The third turned toward the detainees and froze for one stunned half-second. Elias. Nessa ripped her helmet off before the word had fully left her. Her brother stared at her, then laughed once in sheer disbelief. Nessa. She crossed the corridor in 3 strides and hit him hard enough to nearly knock him over, one arm around his neck, one gloved hand on the back of his skull like she was checking he was real. For one tiny moment, the whole world narrowed to the two of them, and the fact that he was standing and warm and not gone. Then training came back like a switch. She pulled away, eyes blazing. Can you walk? He nodded, still stunned. Yeah. Can all of you walk? Alara stepped forward. Some need support, no one stays. Good answer, Jun med-scan sweep. Ramos tag friendlies, move. The Marines went to work with machine speed. Wrist scanners flashed over bruises, burns, dehydration markers, cranial trauma. Recovery patches were slapped on arms. One portable grav stretcher unfolded for Lion when his legs nearly gave out. The detainees received quick instructions, firm voices, steady hands. No comforting lies, no wasted words. That was comforting enough. Pell kept both hands high. I opened the cells. Nessa G. Ave him one fast look. Then today was an excellent day to grow a conscience. The old custodian swallowed. I would like that noted. It's noted, stay here. From farther down the passage came the crash of a security team, hitting the outer doors. Jun looked up. We've got company. Nessa resealed her helmet. Then let's not be here when they arrive. The return route collapsed 30 seconds later. A shape charged blue corridor 12 into a storm of fragments, taking out lights, shredding conduit, and dropping half the ceiling in a shower of white sparks. The blast did not hit the extraction group directly, but it killed the path Team 2 had used to enter. Nessa's HUD redrew instantly. Blocked, alternate route unavailable, pressure breach risk rising. Jun swore. That was deliberate. They're folding us toward the lower transit loop. Of course they are. Team 1 came over comms. Detention corridor compromised. Security pressure from East Junction. We can fight through but not fast with civilians. Team 3 power trunk sealed. Dock 3 is dead. We can maybe crack Dock 5 in 6 minutes. 6 minutes was too long. Mara's voice cut across the channel, flat and clear. All teams update. Nessa spoke while hauling Lion onto the grav stretcher. Team 2 has all detainees. Route Alpha collapsed. Enemy is shaping us. Need extraction revision now. A beat. Then Mara understood new plan, Route Black. Jun stopped moving. Captain, Route Black is vertical waste drop. I know. That shaft vents to exterior maintenance arc. I know. With civilians. I said new plan, Lieutenant, not comfortable plan. Nessa almost laughed. Of course. Of course the captain would pick the insane route if insane remained the fastest line home. Understood, she said. Team 2 moving Route Black. Alara heard the exchange and stared. Waist drop. Nessa looked at her through the visor. Do you trust me? Alara glanced at the armed Marines, the broken corridor, the approaching gunfire, and the station that suddenly felt like it was closing its fist around them. Yes, she said. Great, everybody hates ladders now, move. They ran. Above them, outside the hull, the resolute Wrath finally fired its first visible broadside. Not at the station core. At the approach lanes behind it. 3 tungsten lances crossed vacuum in white-hot silence and detonated among an outbound mine cloud Arvin Saul had ordered released without informing half his own staff. The mines vanished in blooming spheres of metal vapor. The shock hammered Athara Spindle's exterior sensors and lit its hull like a strip of angry daylight. On Command Deck 2, Arvin Saul stared in horror. They fired on us. No, Relvek said, watching the feed. They fired around us. There is a difference. Learn it while time remains. Saul spun. Order full retaliation. Relvek did not move. I said order full retaliation. Slowly, every officer on the deck looked away from the superintendent. No one touched a console. Not because they were mutinying. Because they had seen the same thing Vec had just seen. The human cruiser could have hit the station. It had chosen not to. Any commander with experience knew what that meant. Restraint was not weakness. It was proof of available force. Arvin Saul's voice rose. Do your duty. Relvek finally answered. My duty is to preserve Dominion lives when possible. Yours was to avoid placing them under a human gun in the first place. Somewhere in the station below, another explosion rolled through the decks. Saul's eyes darted toward the sound. The countdown transmitted by the resolute Wrath hit 0000. Nothing dramatic happened. No station-wide blast, no instant death. And somehow that was more frightening than if there had been. Because the deadline had not been a theatrical trigger. It had simply marked the end of Mercy's paperwork. If the tension is hitting just right, help the channel with a like, subscribe for more, and share this episode with your favorite sci-fi partner in crime. Root Black had been designed decades earlier for industrial spill disposal and emergency slag purge. In practical terms, it was a vertical shaft lined with corroded service rails, cable housings, and heat shielding, patched so many times it looked diseased. At the bottom lay an exterior maintenance arc half exposed to vacuum. At the top, if anyone cared, there were warnings in 4 languages telling workers not to do exactly what Nessa's team was now doing. Clip in, she ordered, 2 lines each, civilians between Marines. Elia stared down the shaft. That's a drop. That is an observation, yes. No, I mean that is a terrible drop. Nessa shoved a secondary line into his hands. Good, stay focused. Behind them, Team 1 set breaching charges at the corridor mouth to slow pursuit. Ahead, Jun Park leaned over the edge and scanned down. 60 meters to arc platform. Half the maintenance rungs are gone. Then don't miss the ones that remain. Ilara stepped beside Nessa. Her face was smeared with dust and sweat, but her voice stayed level. I can get my people down if we stagger them. Lion first, Terk after. Elias can support from below. Nessa nodded. Good. Command recognized command. What happened up there? Ilara asked quietly as the others clipped in. Politics, Nessa said. Of course. Humans are here now, so that part gets shorter. That almost made Ilara smile. The first charge behind them blew, shaking rust from the shaft walls. Security teams shouted in the corridor. Team 1 answered with stun bursts and hard foam. No one had time for elegance anymore. Lion descended on the grav stretcher, guided by 2 Marines rappelling beside him. Terk followed, jaw tight, one arm wrapped in a stabilizer splint. Elias went next. Halfway down he looked up at Nessa and gave the smallest nod, an old childhood signal that meant I'm okay enough for now. Then station gravity flickered. Everyone in the shaft slammed against lines as the system lurched between 1/3 pull and 0. A scream echoed below. One of the detainees spun sideways, hit the wall, and lost grip with one hand. Jun launched himself down 2 meters on a controlled slide, caught the civilian's harness, and pinned him to the shaft with his own body. "Got you," he barked. "You are not allowed to die from architecture." Above, Team 1's leader came over comms. "Heavy pressure. We can't hold more than 90 seconds. Nessa looked at the three civilians still waiting and did the math. 90 seconds was a luxury. "Captain," she said, "route black active but compromised. Need exterior pickup at maintenance arc. Repeat, pickup at arc." Mara's reply came instantly, "Already moving." Of course she was. Outside, the Resolute Wrath rolled on axis for the first time since arrival, exposing the massive ventral armor plates that usually face deep space debris and missile fragments. Thruster banks along the stern erupted in synchronized bursts, shoving the cruiser downward and under the station's lower spin. To outside observers, it looked impossible for something that large to move that way without tearing itself apart. Human engineers had heard that before. Sami Orlov braced against his console as inertial dampers fought to keep up. "You know the maintenance arc is inside the station's emergency flak envelope." "Yes," Mara said. "You know Halcyon is 5 minutes out." "Yes." "You know if they catch us broadside under the station." "They won't." Helm tighter. The ship pivoted closer. Alarm lights flashed gold across the bridge. Proximity, hull stress, thermal rise. Mara did not blink. On the station, remaining defensive gunners suddenly found the human cruiser filling every targeting screen with armored belly and spinning point defense clusters. It was the most vulnerable presentation the ship had shown all battle, and for one hopeful second several gunners thought the human captain had finally overcommitted. Then the ventral plates split open. Not weapon bays. Recovery bays. 3 armored extraction skiffs launched downward in a fan of blue-white braking fire, each no larger than a shuttle but built like compressed fortresses. Their job was not battle. Their job was to grab living people from bad places and leave before the bad place realized what had happened. "Skiffs away," Prout called. Mara leaned toward the tactical rail, watching the blinking markers representing Nessa's team inch toward the maintenance arc. "Come on," she murmured, so low only Sami heard it. Below, Nessa reached the exterior platform with the last of the civilians, just as the first Dominion security unit burst into the top of the shaft. Shots cracked downward, sparks screamed off metal. Team 1 returned fire while still descending, shield plates angled up. The maintenance arc itself was a narrow crescent hugging the outside of Athara Spindle's lower hull, open to space on one side and lined with old repair lockers on the other. Emergency atmosphere fields shimmered weakly along the edge, just strong enough to keep lungs working and loose tools from vanishing into vacuum. Beyond the blue haze waited the black. And through that black came the skiffs. Elias saw them first and actually laughed. They did not glide like rescue craft in polished dramas. They came in hot, ugly, and purposeful, dumping thrust in violent bursts, armor blackening under flak spray. One took a glancing hit from a turret pulse and answered by yawing sideways, using its own bulk as a shield wall between the platform and incoming fire. Another extended retrieval clamps before it had fully stabilized. The third opened its side bay while still sliding, inviting chaos aboard. "Nessa," Jun shouted, "we're out of arc." "Then get in the damn boats." The platform erupted. Security teams reached the shaft exit firing live rounds now, whatever restraint had existed finally stripped away by panic and bad orders. Team 1 hit back hard. One Dominion officer went WN with a ruined shoulder. Another lost his weapon to a Marine's close-range shield bash. Foam burst across the doorway. A grenade bounced once, and Jun kicked it into open space before it detonated in a silent flare beyond the atmosphere field. Nessa shoved Elias and Tarek toward the nearest skiff, then turned back because Alara was still outside helping Lion across the gap. The grav stretcher snagged on damaged plating. Lion cried out. A security round snapped past Nessa's neck ring close enough to light a warning on her HUD. She drew her sidearm and fired twice. Not at the gunman. At the support bracket above him. The bracket shattered. Half the shaft lip collapsed in a rain of metal, buying 5 beautiful seconds of confusion. She sprinted for Ilara. "Leave it," she yelled. "It's caught." Then the stretcher serves the station now. Together they grabbed Lion under the shoulders and dragged him bodily across the threshold into the skiff. Medtechs inside hauled him the rest of the way. Ilara stumbled after, turned to look back, and saw Nessa still outside the bay door, one boot hooked under the twisted frame, scanning for the last Marine. Jun Park emerged from smoke with 2 Team 1 troopers and a wounded corporal between them. "Go," he shouted. Nessa fired her line cutter, severing the damaged stretcher rig that blocked the bay. The skiff door began to close. Jun practically threw the wounded corporal inside. 1 Team 1 Marine hit the deck. The second rolled in after him. Jun did not. His left leg caught on the buckled threshold. For one terrible instant, he hung there as the skiff pitched under incoming fire. Nessa lunged, caught his harness, and hauled with everything in her body. The leg came free. Both of them crashed onto the deck as the bay slammed shut over a hail of rounds. Inside the skiff, everyone was breathing too hard, bleeding somewhere, or staring in the dazed way people do when survival arrives too violently to feel real. The pilot's voice came over the intercom, "Hold on to something." Then the skiff dropped. Outside, the Resolute Wrath swung its point defense umbrella over the escaping craft and absorbed the station's remaining fire like a storm wall taking rain. Turret pulses lashed across the cruiser's ventral armor, carving bright scars but failing to bite deep. Flak spread across its shields in waves of white static. One missile found a partial lock and died 300 meters out under a cloud of defensive flechettes. The skiffs raced home beneath that shield of metal and fury. On the bridge, 3 blue extraction markers crossed the last line into safe approach corridor. Prute's voice cracked, "Recovery in progress." Mara did not sit down. "Count them." "Counting." She looked at the station. "You made me do this," she said softly, though no one on the bridge knew if she was speaking to Arvin Saul, the Dominion, or the galaxy itself. On command deck 2, Arvin Saul finally understood. Not fully, men like him rarely did, but enough. He understood that the human cruiser had been able to kill the station at several points and had chosen not to. He understood the boarding teams had entered routes his own planners forgot existed. He understood his response fleet was still minutes away, and the detainees were almost certainly already gone. Above all, he understood that none of this had looked like desperation. It had looked practiced. That was the horror. This had not been a species losing control. This had been a species applying control under emotional load, with terrifying skill. Relvek saw the same realization hit him and felt no pleasure in it. "Transmit station surrender to all local bands," Vek said. Saul rounded on him. "You cannot." "I can," said Vek, "and I just did." He hit the command key himself. Across the station, in every corridor and service bay and frightened operations room, the message rang out. "All security units stand down. This is Commander Relvek. Cease resistance immediately. I repeat, cease resistance immediately." Some units obeyed at once. Some obeyed because they had already run out of nerve. A few did not, and those few discovered that human Marines stopped being patient when someone shot at medevac corridors. Aboard Skiff 2, Elias finally found enough breath to speak. "You came fast," he said. Nessa, helmet off now, eyes still bright with battle, laughed once without humor. "You should hear what Captain calls fast." He looked around at the wounded Marines, the trembling civilians, the med tech sealing Jun's burned forearm, and then at his sister again. Were you scared? Nessa thought about lying. Instead, she said yes. Elias nodded. Good, me too. And somehow that made both of them feel more solid. If you're still here with your heart rate up, hit like, jump into the channel, and share this with someone who knows good stories get better under pressure. Recovery alarms rolled through Bay 4 as the skiffs locked down. Med teams surged forward before. The ramps fully settled. Gravity clamps grabbed the craft. Steam hissed from scarred hull seams. One skiff had lost half its outer sensor mesh and came in sideways. Another bled coolant. The third looked like something had tried to chew through its port plate and been disappointed by the taste. The detainees were carried or guided into the bay in a blur of white med lights and shouted names. Morno here. Need fluids on this one. Concussion risk Bay 2. Get Ward's brother a seated scan. Captain Mara arrived before the last stretcher cleared the ramp. She did not make a scene of it. She simply appeared in the bay with 2 medical officers and a security clerk already taking chain-of-custody notes for the diplomatic case she planned to bury the Dominion under later. Ilara Quinn, Mara said as the survey captain straightened from the med bench. Ilara blinked at her, then gave a stiff half-salute out of old habit and exhaustion. Captain. Mara returned a nod. Welcome back. Ilara swallowed hard. You came yourself. I send the ship first. For a second, Ilara's composure nearly broke. She looked past Mara at the Marines, at the medics swarming over her team, at Nessa kneeling beside Elias while pretending not to fuss over him too obviously, and then back at the captain. Thank you, she said. Mara's expression changed just a little, not softer, more personal. You don't thank someone for refusing to leave you in a cage. She turned to the medics. Full scans, document everything, every bruise, every restraint mark. If they breath bad air over there, I want the chemistry named. One physician nodded, already on it. Sami Orlov's voice came through the bay speakers. Captain to bridge. Halcyon Response Group has entered engagement envelope. Of course. Mara touched 2 fingers to her earpiece. Status. 6 ships, spread wedge. Missile carrier holding long. They received the station's surrender but are not slowing. She looked once more across the bay. All 13 alive. Some hurt, some shaken, all here. Good. Now came the part everyone remembered later and misunderstood first. Because the rescue was not the end of the danger. It was the moment the danger changed shape. Mara stepped closer to Ilara. Can you stand under your own command? Yes. Then gather your people and stay with medical. My crew has another argument to finish. Ilara held her gaze. Will they attack? They already decided to. And you? Mara's answer came so quietly, it almost disappeared under the bay noise. I already decided they won't touch this ship. Then she turned and left. On the bridge, the tactical display bloomed with new red vectors. Halcyon Response Group entered in textbook formation, proud and predictable. 2 destroyers forward, escorts screening, missile carrier behind. Their commander, Commodore Shao Ren, transmitted on military band before he was fully in range. Human cruiser, power down and prepare for seizure. You have conducted an unlawful armed incursion into Dominion territory, assaulted a sovereign station, and abducted lawful detainees. Your exit window has closed. Sami snorted, abducted. Mara arrived at the rail, opened the line. Open. This is Captain Mara Ilian, she said. Your station unlawfully detained protected civilians and opened fire during a recovery operation. Those civilians are alive and aboard my ship. Athara Spindle has transmitted surrender. If you continue your approach, you will be the side escalating a concluded incident into open battle. Commodore Ren did not answer immediately. When he did, His tone carried the confidence of fresh force arriving late enough to mistake timing for control. "You are outnumbered." "No," Mara said, "you are late." A murmur ran around the bridge. Ren's answer hardened. "You are one retrieval cruiser." "Correct." There was a small pause. Then Mara added, "And your mistake is thinking that means something comforting." She cut the channel. Sami looked over. "You ever think about saying things in a less memorable way?" "Rarely. Helm, rotate to shield recovery bays. Bring us between Halcyon and the station." Sami frowned. "Between. If they open with missile saturation, we'll wear it." "Yes." "That is a lot of confidence." "That is geometry," Mara said. "If they want to hit us, they risk hitting their own surrendered station. They'll hesitate for at least one exchange. I only need one." Human warships were designed with a cruel understanding of how other species fought. Most fleets pursued advantage through escalation ladders, doctrinal spacing, and controlled engagement windows. Humans assumed all that would fail the moment someone important was behind them on a hospital bed. Their ships were layered for ugly minutes, redundant coolant loops, buried drive cores, distributed sensors, decoy heat vanes. Armor arranged not for prettiest profile, but for which decks humans most hated losing. Every design spoke the same quiet truth. If things go bad, keep the people alive long enough to get mean. The resolute Wrath rolled broadside between Halcyon and Athera's spindle, a wall of metal marked now with fresh scars, open weapon ports, and the stubborn presence of a vessel that had already done the hard part and was therefore free to be difficult. Commodore Ren made the wrong call. He signaled missile release. Relvek saw it from the station deck and actually closed his eyes for a moment in pity. Not for Mara. For Ren. The missile carrier opened in a disciplined fan, rack spitting guided ordnance into the dark with beautiful symmetry. 56 warheads burned toward the human cruiser, bracketed by escort cannon fire and destroyer lock beams. To Dominion tacticians, it was a clean first strike, cautious but decisive. To human point defense, it was target practice wrapped in disappointment. "Now," Mara said. The resolute Wrath came alive. Its port lattice erupted in overlapping fields of interception. Kinetic needles ripped outward in silver storms. Laser clusters stitched through the black so fast they looked solid. Short-burst jammers punched holes in guidance routines. 12 missiles died before crossing half-range. 9 turned stupid and wandered off toward empty coordinates. 4 slammed into one another after their target solutions were swapped. The rest hit shield and armor in hard, concussive flashes that rocked the ship but failed to slow it. At the same moment, Sami Orlov answered. Not by firing on the missile carrier. He shot the lead destroyer's sensor crown off first. The burst was surgical, almost rude in its precision. 1 second the destroyer held lock authority over the escort screen. The next its forward sensor assembly vanished in a bloom of fragments and blind sparks. Formation integrity collapsed instantly. 2 escorts drifted wide. Fire lanes tangled. The missile carrier lost mid-course correction support. "Lead ship blinded," Sami reported. "Good," Mara said. "Now teach them why angry is not the same as reckless." The battle that followed would be studied in 4 navies, denied in 2 senates, and quietly used to rewrite 3 whole branches of Dominion tactical education. The common public version later made it sound like a heroic slugging match, one brave human ship against superior numbers. That version missed the real terror of it. The resolute Wrath did not overpower Halcyon. It outthought them while furious. Mara never chased kills she did not need. She split the enemy instead. A burst to the first escort's drive vanes forced it spinning out of line. A feint toward the missile carrier dragged one destroyer into crossfire risk with its own ships. A sudden downward vector near the surrendered station made Ren hesitate exactly where Mara knew he would. because even bad commanders disliked explaining friendly station damage to superiors. Every hesitation became space. Every space became advantage. In Medical Bay 2, the recovered civilians felt the ship's deck shudder under impacts and went silent all over again. No one needed to ask what was happening. The answer trembled through the walls. Lion Morno looked toward the ceiling. Are they staying to fight? Ilara, one arm in a pressure wrap, met his eyes. They're staying to leave. That doesn't sound like the same thing. For humans, said Elias quietly from the next bed, sometimes it is. Nessa sat beside him, armor half removed, knuckles raw where gloves had rubbed skin away. She should have been on another boarding rotation or outer defense support. Instead, Mara had ordered her to medical until cleared by psych and medic both. Nessa hated that order. She obeyed it anyway. The bay speakers carried no battle chatter. Mara protected her wounded from that, but the ship itself spoke enough. Every vibration had meaning. Heavy lateral thump, shield hit. Quick triple judder, point defense chain. Deep grinding hum, vector shift under full mass. A rising whine that ended in a muffled bang somewhere aft, countermeasure bloom. Elias watched his sister's face as she unconsciously translated each sound. You want to be up there, he said. Yes. Because you're angry. Nessa looked at him for a long second. Then she leaned back and answered honestly. No, because they're angry. He frowned. What's the difference? She glanced around the bay, at Ilara, at Lion, at Terka asleep under sedation, at two Marines getting patched up at the far end. The difference, she said, is that I want to hit someone. They want to get everybody home. That was the part outsiders missed. Anger on a human warship was not mostly about revenge. Revenge was easy and stupid and often came too late. What actually changed when a crew got angry was scale. Their tolerance for risk bent. Their willingness to absorb damage climbed. The speed of their decisions increased because nobody had spare emotion left for vanity or hesitation. Anything unrelated to protection fell away. They became simpler. And simpler under press. Yor was deadly. Back on the bridge, Commodore Wren finally understood he was not facing a trapped retrieval cruiser. He was facing a ship that had already fulfilled its moral objective, and therefore had the most dangerous luxury in combat. Freedom to choose the lesson. Captain, Sami said, Enemy Destroyer 2 is charging Spinal Lance. Mara nodded. He wants one dramatic shot so he can feel in command again. Helm, give him the angle. Sami turned. You're baiting a Spinal Lance. I'm inviting an apology. The resolute wrath tilted, exposing a corridor between armored bulk and shield shimmer that looked, on Wren's firing solution, like a narrow wound in the ship's defenses. The destroyer took it. The lance fired. At the last instant, Mara rolled. The beam missed the human cruiser by meters, clipped the outer debris shell around Athara's spindle, and slammed into one of Halcyon's own escorts as its commander tried to realign formation. The escort's port side erupted in white fire. Commodore Wren shouted something over open band that translators later rendered as a mix of disbelief and rage. Sami actually smiled then. That was almost cruel. Cruel would have been letting him hit the station, Mara said. Target the lance emitter, end his confidence. A twin salvo punched through the destroyer's prow. Its spinal assembly died in a fountain of metal. Halcyon's neat wedge dissolved. If this rescue feels bigger than a battle, tap like, subscribe, and send this video to the friend who always says humanity would be terrifying in space. Far from the firing lines, on the old Lauren worlds where long memory was treated as a civic duty, observer Sethek finished reading the human archive entry he had opened at the start of the crisis, and transmitted a private note to 3 people who still listened when he was afraid. The note contained only one sentence. If a human warship has gone silent before appearing, Do not ask what it intends. Ask who it is trying to get back. That note would travel slowly through diplomatic relays, but its wisdom had already proven itself. On Athara Spindle, Commander Rel Vec stood on the command deck and watched the battle through a side display no one had asked him to use. Arvin Saul was shouting into 3 separate channels now, demanding reinforcements, demanding explanations, demanding someone restore the authority he had never really possessed. Vec ignored him. Outside, the human cruiser fought like a locked door. Not explosive, not glorious, final. One escort tried flanking wide and lost drive control to a precision burst across its rear nozzles. Another launched breaching torpedoes and watched them vanish under an interception pattern timed so tightly it seemed personal. The remaining destroyer attempted to bull forward on armor and discovered human gunnery favored disassembling aggressiveness, one expensive component at a time. Rel Vec had spent decades learning how species revealed themselves under battle pressure. Some became grandiose, some became cruel, some became stupid in ways peacetime would never have predicted. Humans became intimate. They fought as if every engagement was about specific names. That made them unpredictable to bureaucracies and unforgettable to survivors. He turned when Arvin Saul grabbed his arm. "Order the station guns back online," Saul hissed. "If we strike now while the human is engaged." Rel Vec looked at the hand on his sleeve, then at Saul's face. "No. You are under civilian override. You ceased being credible when you started a fleet fight around your own surrendered station." Saul's composure shattered. "You would side with them." "No," said Vec. "I would side with anyone in this room who knows the difference between authority and delusion." He pulled free. Across the bridge, 2 officers visibly relaxed that someone had finally said it aloud. Arvin Saul made one last move born of panic and vanity. He opened a secure line to the station's internal demolition net. Athara Spindle, being a secret prison hidden inside an old refinery, contained enough emergency scuttle charges to prevent evidence capture if political winds ever turned ugly. The charges were never meant for combat use. They were meant for erasure. Rel Vec saw the line open and cross the distance faster than anyone thought a one-eyed veteran with a damaged hand could move. He hit Saul from the side. Both men slammed into the console. The demolition authorization key skipped. Saul clawed for it. Vec drove an elbow into his chest and pinned him against the station map. "You fool," Vec growled. Saul spat blood. "If we lose the station, we lose everything." Vec's face hardened. "You lost everything when you thought 13 civilians were small enough to gamble with." Security officers finally surged in, not to aid Saul, to take him down. That moment would never make the public reports. Governments like tidy lies and manageable blame. But years later, several deck officers still remembered the exact CT look on Saul's face as the room chose reality over hierarchy. It was not noble. It was simply late. On the human bridge, Sami looked up sharply. "Captain, station demolition net just flashed live then went dark." Mara's head snapped toward the display. "Explain." "Unclear. Looked like an internal authorization attempt interrupted mid-chain." "Can they still trigger?" "Possible." She did not hesitate. "Open a tight beam to Commander Rel Vec only." A pause, then a weathered face appeared on a side screen. One eye natural, one mechanical, expression exhausted. "This is Rel Vec," he said. "Civilian superintendent is contained. Station under military control." Mara studied him for half a second. She believed him. "Your demolition grid flashed." Vec's jaw tightened. "He attempted scuttle access. I stopped it. I cannot yet swear no hidden chain remains." "Then evacuate non-essential personnel to hardened compartments and transmit the demolition architecture now. That data is classified." Mara leaned in the slightest amount.